Ladies and gentlemen, and everybody out there who is kind enough to be watching, my name is Mark Drax. I am on the board of SASH, and today we have another conversation from the couch, and I am delighted to welcome Laney Knowlton from knowltoncounseling.com. Is that right, Laney? Have I got that right?
That's my website, yes.
Fantastic. Laney, a warm welcome to you. Where does the world find you today?
I am in Dallas, Texas. I grew up in Massachusetts, but I have been in Texas for almost 2 decades.
Amazing.
So not considered Texan by Texans, but everybody else, yeah, I've been here for a while.
I'm going to say you don't have enough of a drawl to be Texan, and even me sitting here in England, I know that.
No, I don't have a Texas drawl, nor do I have the Massachusetts accent. So.
Well, you just sound beautifully American to me. Well, I'll just leave it there. I don't know enough about the differences to even start to comment on that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for turning up today. It is such a pleasure to meet you. We are here to talk about you and your process. And this will be going out to on our website in weeks to come. So I'd love to kick off. I've got you on this screen. I've got a bunch of questions on my left-hand screen. So I'd like to kick off, if I can, by saying who or what inspired you? If you roll back the years, a couple, I'm sure, and say who or what inspired you to get into this industry in the first place? Let alone we'll come to what you're specifically doing. But how did you get into this industry?
So I got my bachelor's in criminal justice and wanted to be a district attorney. And ended up, I decided that would take too much time, and I wanted to be able to spend time with my kids and my husband. My therapist told me I'd be a good therapist. So I started looking into therapy schools and ended up getting my master's in marriage and family therapy. So that's how I ended up a therapist.
That's amazing. Also, district attorney, I mean, probably less death threats as a therapist.
In most cases, yes.
Or have I been watching too many movies?
I don't know. My perception of district attorney is based off of TV shows and movies too. So.
Well, I've selfishly knowing that we both work in this wonderful industry called commonly known, I think it's mental health. I think you made the right choice.
Thank you. Me too.
Tell us, you do some amazing work in the field of sex addiction. You've got books out, but we're here today to talk about your specific model. So I'd love you to kick off and ask you, would you like to please describe your model? Tell us all about the specificity of your work.
So the model's called Coupled Recovery. And that was because I was trying to connect individual recovery with relational recovery. So it wasn't geared towards couples specifically, but it works very well for couples. It also, it just connects the relational aspects of recovery. What I'm trying to do is connect the tools that are already in the field that treat problematic sexual behavior, sex addiction, whatever phrase you're going to use for it. I do use the term sex addiction because I have clients that believe that's a very powerful term for them and applies to the power and control that the behaviors have over their lives. And I don't want to minimize that. So I do use the term sex addiction in those cases, but connects the treatment of problematic sexual behaviors with the treatment of betrayal trauma, adds the relational aspects because I'm a marriage and family therapist, so I work a lot with couples and systems, and also incorporates healthy sexuality through sex therapy principles. And so my model is trying to connect all of those. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. There have been so many amazing people in the field that have already done so much work, but I would like to connect them so that usually what I see when couples walk in, is one goes in this direction, one goes in this direction. By the time they have the ability to connect, by the time they've created safety, like they're way on the other side. So I'd like to have it more be like this so we can incorporate the couples work throughout the process and the relational work. Connection's really important.
And so you're touching here on another question I have, Laney, which is in simple terms, why did you create this? What need did you see that you believe you're fulfilling with this very inclusive sounding model?
So I know for For me personally, I ended up working in the field of sex addiction and betrayal. First of all, about 2 decades ago, we had a friend who committed suicide because of her husband's affairs. And they reached out for help and tried to get help, and they weren't able to. So I always have her in the back of my head. And then also I'm familiar with recovery. This model, it really is a love letter to my husband. And it's the tools that we've used to be able to navigate and heal our connection to each other and heal individually. And so I want to be able to bring that to couples. I want to be able to bring that to individuals. I have people who walk in, we have so many tools to be able to stop the behavior, to process the trauma underneath. But as far as reconnection is concerned, I don't see a whole lot of that. And I think it's a really vital part of the process.
So refreshing to hear. And thank you for your openness. I am also in recovery from sex addiction. It has blighted my life. I'm 55 years of age, and I first came in from the cold on the 8th of July, 2004. So it's been a long journey. Testament to the fact that, so if I'm right in understanding, if I'm hearing correctly, you and your husband are still together.
Yes, we've been married for 25 years.
Wow. Well, if that's not enough of an endorsement for your own model, then nothing is. Congratulations. I don't mean to minimize with humor. It's an amazing achievement. Also, something else you were just saying, Laney, talk to me about just briefly on the name, because there's so much confusion and indeed sometimes anger from some people in our field about what to call this problem. What do you say to them?
So to me, it's not so much the label as identifying that it's dysfunctional patterns that are causing really significant pain. And I do think that it centers on consent. That's something I'm getting my PhD in clinical sexology and working towards ASEX certification as a sex therapist. And consent is such a huge concept in sex therapy. And it really isn't just about sex. It's about, like, any relationship, consent is vital. And when we have the violation of consent, that's where betrayal happens. Like, you don't know about something, so you can't consent to it, or you don't understand the repercussions of it, so you can't consent to it, or you're gaslit and manipulated and coerced into something. That's where betrayal comes from. And to me, we really need to focus on being able to connect to others, not just to ourselves. So the word coupled means to connect two things. And that's where the term came from, coupled recovery, because it is coupled together with the connection that you have with other people.
It's so good to hear that. What do you say to the naysayers out there, who you'll have one person on one side of a table who says sex addiction doesn't exist, and then you'll have someone else on the other side, namely you and me, who will say it does? What do you say to the naysayers who want to fight even what we call this problem?
The people who are living through it, if they are able to empower their lives by using the term sex addiction, and if we're able to understand the hold that behaviors have on people by using the term sex addiction, I feel like you're doing them a great injustice by throwing the word out the window because you're offended by it. So that's my personal opinion. That being said, I recognize there's a whole lot of shame connected to the term sex addiction, but there's shame connected to the term problematic sexual behaviors too. So I think we need to work to decrease the shame to process through it rather than throw out the term. That's my personal opinion.
I salute you. I herald that strong fighting talk. I think there is way too much fight and lack of collaboration in this industry. Sex in itself carries massive stigmas. You know, we had Queen Victoria, you had the Pilgrim Fathers, and for the last God knows how many decades, even hundreds of years, sex itself has been shamed, let alone dysfunctional use of sex and sexual behavior. So because there is so much historic shame, we have to start working as a community to do what serves the people who are struggling and stop fighting over, this is a very English term, the bloody name. All right. So and that's polite, trust me. So thank you. I so agree with what you've said. Moving on from my passionate agreement with you, I love you. Let me just scroll down because you've introduced me to your model, and I'd love it if you could talk about the stages, because it's such a beautiful model. There's a lot to it, so just tell our audience a little bit more in more detail. You've got the 3 key stages for a start.
So my business partner is Brian Martin, and the 2 of us work together. The model is mine, but he's helped me so much with so many of the phases of it and being able to incorporate it and actually work with couples on it. So if a couple walks into our office, one goes with him, one goes with me. Obviously, it doesn't, I'm just using Brian as an example of this. But so one goes with Brian, one goes with me, and we do co-therapy for their couples work. Phase 1, we focus on emotional safety and truth. And this is based off of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's based off the pyramid of intimacy that Dan Drake and Janice Cottle have in their full disclosure books. But you have to use truth to be able to create emotional safety in a relationship, or there's no foundation to be able to build connection on. If you don't address the behaviors, if you don't address the betrayal, if you don't recreate things so that people can trust each other, then it's not going to matter what else you do in recovery. You have to have that as a foundation first. So that's phase 1. We and actually I do a disclosure process, and that takes probably 12 to 18 months usually to be able to work through that. That I don't use the traditional disclosure process verbatim. We actually divide the first letter. So traditional disclosures are usually a what letter, like this is what I did, an impact letter from the partner, and an amends letter. And we add a second letter after the first letter, and that's the why letter. So we want them to be able to look at what they did, to be able to present that to their partner so their partner has the pieces of the puzzle, to be able to say it out loud so it can combat shame for the betrayer, because there's so much shame connected to what they do, what they've done to their partner, what they've done to themselves. And if they don't say it out loud, they're not going to trust any of the connection we build either. So it's not just for the partner, it's for both. And then once we've done the what letter, we really want to dig into the why. The whys are, and I know I've seen your website, and I love that your first quote is, I'm looking at the why behind things, because that's the healing. The healing is understanding how I got here. Like, I'm not just crazy. I'm not just broken. There isn't just something inherently wrong with me. Like, this makes sense that I got here. It also gives you the tools to be able to get out of where you're at, to be able to change the process. And if we put it in the first letter, then we end up, it sounds like justification. It eliminates the empathy that is expressed towards the partner's experience towards the betrayal if you include it in the first letter. So the second letter really is essential to be able to add, in my opinion, and it helps so much for the betrayer and for the partner to be able to see the process, to understand how they got there, to be able to develop the tools to be able to break free from those behaviors. And then we do an impact letter as well, which is the partner story, and then an amends letter after that, which is written off of the impact letter. And that usually takes 12 to 18 months. So that's usually early recovery. Middle recovery is connection and empathy. That's traditional couples work with a betrayal sensitive lens. And then late recovery is healthy sexuality. Because if you take things that are dysfunctional and shame-based out, you have to add things in that are not shame-based, that are connective instead.
It's an incredibly thorough process. And you're right. To me, when I work with the men I help, the why is everything, because so many of the people that come to you and come to me and come to the thousands of people in our industry, they know what they're doing, and it'll be, the common ones are alcohol, drugs, sex, gambling, but none of them know why they're doing it, or that if they truly understood why they were doing it, it will be much harder to do it. Yes, it's amazing what you do. The disclosure part of the process, I think, is huge, and you talk about this in detail. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, you say it takes 18 months. I mean, that's an astonishingly long time. I mean, can you give me? I mean, how has it come to take that long? Why do you think it's so important that you space it out that much?
So the first letter we usually try to do about 90 days in. I don't want to make the partner sit and not know what's going on. That doesn't feel safe. And I don't want to make the betrayer sit in what they did. And again, any work that we do that's relational prior to the betrayer saying, this is what I've done, is usually undermined because they don't trust any of the connection that we build, and the partner doesn't know that they'll feel betrayed again once they find out the details. So we do try to get to that letter as quickly as possible. The 90 days, though, allows us to be able to dig into it. It allows them to be able to go through and really get as much information as they can. No matter how many years we spend writing a story, we're probably going to miss some details of it, but making sure that this is as complete as possible is the best chance that both the betrayer and the partner has for being able to heal from it. So we try to do that letter within the first 90 days. Sometimes it takes, a month or two longer, depending on what's going on. If we're going to hit the middle of Christmas, we might postpone it. If there's a wedding in the family. Yeah, we don't really want to create the memories around that holiday.
No, that's a good idea.
So the second letter usually takes at least 90 days, sometimes longer. We really want to dig into that processing. And at that point, the partner isn't waiting to find out the details. So a lot of times they're able to see there are changes that are already happening as both the betrayer starts trusting the process, the partner starts trusting the process, they start trusting each other. They stop being worried what else is out there, or what else are they going to find out about me. So that one can take longer. The impact letter can be written at any point, but I do make sure that clients add to it after they've heard each letter. So if the partner wants to write it when they walk into my office, that's fine, but I'll have them add to it after the what letter, add to it after the why letter before they present it. So that can be written in conjunction with the why letter and then presented within, a month or two afterwards. Usually it's about 3 months. So it's about 3 months for each letter. Sometimes it's a little bit longer for some of the letters. And then the amends letter, we take about 90 days and if we need an extra month or two for that one, but we really want people to be able to get as much healing as they can out of this. So to me, recovery from betrayal takes 3 to 5 years. And that is not just stopping the behaviors. That is stopping the behaviors, rebuilding connection, rebuilding trust in yourself, rebuilding emotional safety in yourself and for the partner, rebuilding the relationships, working on dysfunctional patterns, and adding back in healthy sexuality, or not even back in. It might be creating it completely from scratch. Very often my clients have wounds that are pretty primal in that area.
In your experience, Laney, when clearly you're talking about two people here, the couple, but how often do you encounter children, most notably, who may need help as well?
I don't usually work with minors. I've only had a few clients that are under the age of 18, but I do see a pervasive pattern of a lack of openness about sexuality, a lack of willingness to talk about it in general in society. And that adds so much shame. And there's so much accessibility, anonymity, accessibility, and affordability with the internet. So our kids do need us to be able to talk about this. They need us to be able to work through our shame on our own, to be able to give them a safe place to talk about it. And to me, that's really important. I don't specialize in it, so I don't have the numbers. I haven't had a whole lot of young individuals who are coming in struggling with this, but I know I see requests for it on a pretty regular basis. It's not just something adults deal with.
And your clients, do you have an average age for your typical couple?
They're mostly in their 40s or 50s, sometimes 60s. That would be the average client. That doesn't mean that we don't have ones that are younger and ones that are older.
Sure. And their children, I'm assuming a lot of your clients have their own children.
Yes.
And are they ever involved in this process, or you keep them out of it?
It depends on the individuals. It depends on the age of the kids. It depends on what's going on in the living situations. In general, I recommend that, especially if the kids are in the house, that they also have their own therapist, but they don't work with, so if the couple's working with me and Brian, I wouldn't have the kids work with either me or Brian. Sure. It would be another therapist. But having somebody that they can work through this with, I think, is essential. To me, there will also be a part of this process where we have to figure out how to be able to possibly, I'll just need to write a book on it and bring people in to help with that one. But how do we communicate this to kids? How much do we tell them? What would be helpful? What wouldn't be? In my experience, if the kids are in the house, or if the kids are connected and they're seeing these things happening, at some level, being able to take some accountability is usually an important part of the healing process. And it helps to combat the side effects of it's almost gaslighting. I know they're not meaning to gaslight, but if you tell your kids everything's fine and they can sense that something isn't,
right.
Like, we're trying to teach our kids to be able to be human, which means they're going to have struggles too. We can't paint the world as happily ever after, give them tools to work through things. But by the same token, telling them all the details triangulates them into the situation. It causes them to have to pick sides. It causes them to, So there's a balance between the two.
Beautiful. And treating every customer as an individual. Laney, we've all been through a really interesting time in our life. It's called a pandemic. And it's changed a lot forever. It's changed. I think it's probably safe to say it's changed all of us forever. Do you notice, have there been any notable themes that have come up for you in your work that you can attribute directly to the pandemic?
I think it brought things to a head for a lot of my clients. There were some of my clients that were able to face things, see things in themselves that they hadn't been able to see before. There were other of my clients where being quarantined together brought up some relational dysfunction that needed to be addressed.
Right.
I think it made us appreciate the connection in our life more. And that's something that I've seen as a pattern, that it really is important to be able to prioritize. And I mean, it feels like the last 3 years have been indefinite. Yes. It's really hard to remember pre-pandemic at this point for me, but I don't remember connection being viewed as quite as important as it is seen as when we all had to not have in-person connection for so long and had to actively work to incorporate that in our lives.
I think the connection piece is astonishing. And I've read so many articles of where the connection is the key, but of course it goes both ways. It can destroy connection, but it can also greatly intensify them. And then a greatly intensified connection can also lead to its own problems. But I think in the sexual realm, certainly, and child abuse, I think, has dramatically increased in our country. Sadly, with people being forced to stay together too much. And then, of course, strange things have tragically happened. But yeah, I'm not surprised you've noticed this. The connection piece is critical. You have books, a lot of them, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you have one coming out in March next year.
I do have one coming out in March. That's my first full length.
Tell yourself, Laney. Tell the world about it. Please take this opportunity.
So the disclosure process I just described, those are the books that I currently have published. There's one behind me. It's Coupled Recovery, Disclosure Booklet A, Disclosure Booklet B, and then there's one that just has the handouts. I try to publish all my books in 8.5 by 11, so you can make photocopies of pages if you want to use them for your clients.
You're very kind.
I don't know about you. I don't want to have to buy a brand new book if I just need 1 or 2 pages for somebody. So you are welcome to make photocopies of them. And those are the ones that are already published. The one that's coming out in March, I'm writing a series of books that will incorporate early, middle, and late recovery. So there'll be one for each of the phases of recovery. And the one in March is the one for early recovery. So it is written, it's called Facing Hope, and it'll be Coupled Recovery Book 1. And Facing Hope, because when I was trying to come up with a title, I put the question out on social media and I had someone respond to it, and they sent me a private message and they said, why don't you use the term facing hope? Because sometimes hope is the scariest part of the process. Wow. You are so, it is terrifying to have hope that you could actually heal from something like this. And that really struck me. So they gave me permission to use it. And that story is in the introduction of the book. But so that book comes out in March.
I think that's amazing. I love the fact you've listened to you say a client messaged you that.
It was a friend.
A friend. Okay. Well, maybe that friend
who's in recovery.
Oh, well, maybe she can become a client. That's fantastic. What a lovely story. What is the underlying message that you would like people to get from your material?
That there's hope, that they matter, that they're not just broken,
mm-hmm.
and that connection's really important.
And to further that question, how do you see all that you do being so helpful, so advantageous towards sexual health?
So to me, if you cannot sort through the behaviors that you have shame around, if you can't sort through the behaviors that are being problematic, being able to sort through the trauma connected to things, it's going to be very difficult to connect to your body and connect to a partner's body, and to be able to have the emotional connection that comes along with that. So that is vital to sexual health, in my opinion, the ability to sort through the behaviors that are problematic and dysfunctional for us. And dysfunctional means disconnecting. It's not pathologizing.
Well, I love the way you say that. There's been so much pathologizing of so much of this realm through the last however many decades. It is lovely to meet someone, talk with someone who is so open to help a person just be a person and not to pathologize necessarily what they're doing. There are many ways to love these days. And these days, I mean, look at the LGBTQ, I think that's correct. They add letters, more letters every month. But there are so many beautiful ways to see sex and to see each other these days. And we have to stop pigeonholing people and crucifying them in the process. Laney,
Yeah.
Any thoughts on what you're doing going forwards? Is there anywhere that you would like to, again, sell yourself? Is there anything where it's coming up for you, a conference, anything you would like to inform people about, where they can see you, learn more from you, hear you, etc., in any amount of coming months or years?
I am applying for conferences for next year. I don't know which ones I'll get in. Some years I get into, 5, and other years I get into none. So we'll have to see what happens with that. I do know I'm presenting for the Trauma Education Association in Dallas, and I believe they do that at least hybrid. So that's available. I think that's in June. And other than that, I have the book coming out in March, and then there'll be a middle recovery book that is later on down the road, and then the healthy sexuality book that's later on down the road. There'll also be another book, which is, I labeled it book 4 in my head, but I don't think it's actually 4. It's called Surviving Abandoned Betrayal. And so that's for partners who are abandoned in the recovery process, whether that means that their spouse refuses, or partner, significant other, because they may not be married. I try to use gender neutral language and relationally neutral language as well, because I want this to apply to everyone. It's not just a male betrayer, female partner thing,
Yes.
which is what those are the pronouns I usually see when we talk about this field.
Sure.
So, but surviving abandoned betrayal is if you are abandoned in the process, either emotionally, if they refuse to do the work, or if they walk out on the relationship. And to me, that incorporates additional steps. So that one will probably be the next one that comes out. Amazing. Even though it's technically book 4.
Hey, you just keep printing, because it's gold dust. I'd love to wrap this talk up with 2 questions. Do you have a final message to potential clients out there?
You matter. Don't give up. I do think it's really important to trust your gut. And if just because someone's a clinician in the field does not mean that they necessarily are betrayal sensitive. And it's okay to find somebody who is. I think that's important. I think it is important to, and I'm not trying to bash anybody with that. I've seen so many people that are hurt because there are some elements missing. And I would want people to know that it's okay to look for somebody who can give you the support that you need, who can be a tether, who can help you find healing. And don't give up. Keep fighting. It's so worth it. And I tell all my clients, I only say I told you so in one situation. Because I don't usually like saying I told you so. But I tell them that if they do the recovery work, whether their significant other does it or not, no matter what position they and what label they connect to, no matter where they're at, if they do the recovery work, they will love themselves so much more than they do now. And their relationships with others will end up being so much more fulfilling and so much deeper. And it absolutely is worth it. So don't give up.
I love that, Lane. Don't give up. And also, you touch on a really important point there. In my experience, helping the men that I help with, I have seen enough relationships fail because only one person of a couple do the work. And unfortunately, when only one person does the work and starts to grow and learns what boundaries mean and they become healthy, they can sometimes become quite frictional to someone who remains in dis-ease, because that person is no longer a pushover. And sometimes, sadly, that means that friction sets in and they do part company. This has got to be a team effort, in my humble opinion. Second question.
I agree with you.
Thank you. Well, I know you do, and that's why hence the entire title of what you do. So, but I'm just sort of ramming my stamp on that, saying because I've seen too many relationships fail for this sad reason, and it's avoidable. Second question, last question. What advice, what final words would you have for clinicians? You've talked to clients so compassionately. What message would you like to leave for clinicians?
First, whenever I talk to clinicians in this field, the vast majority of us have some experience in the field, meaning personal experience. So we're fighting against our own stories. We're fighting against our own triggers. We're leaning into the pain that comes from watching somebody either make mistakes that we may have made or made mistakes that a loved one may have made, whether it's a parent, whether it's a significant other, whether it's ourselves. So I really admire individuals who go into this, who, they've walked through their own hell and they go back in to try to help other people to pull them out of it. So that would be the first thing that I say is thank you so much for the work that everyone is doing and for the redemption that you are being able to give other people. And then also just, I think it's really essential that we work together. And
yes,
that we're able to connect to each other to model this for our clients, and not fight against each other, but actually come together, because we each have so many pieces of the puzzle. And if we're able to work together, to me, that's where the real healing comes from, is incorporating all of these pieces and connecting to each other.
Hallelujah. And let's circle back to the very beginning. Stop arguing over a name. If someone is hurting, help them. That should be the slogan. Simple, isn't it? Laney,
yeah,
it is
absolutely.
Hey, there's a book in there somewhere. There we are.
You can write that one.
Already? I was offering that one for you for free.
Thank you.
Laney, it is such fun talking to you. It really is. We've gotten to know each other. You keep yourself well and safe. And of course, plans for Christmas ahead?
I have my daughter coming home from college, so I'll get to see her for the first time in a couple of months. And
wonderful.
I have 6 kids, and so 2 of them are out of the house, and we'll have all 6 there on Christmas Day at least. What about you?
Wow, big family. I have 4 brothers, and we haven't been together for a long time. I mean, I'm 55, and we range from 51 to 64. So yeah, enjoy that while it lasts, and good luck with that turkey or whatever else you're roasting on Christmas Day.
Thank you.
Laney, take great care of yourself. A huge cyber hug from across the Atlantic, and can't wait to see you again soon. But for today, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Mark. I really enjoyed it.
Take care. See you again.